This is Charlotte Talks. I'm Mike Collins. Even as we are consumed with the holidays, Charlotte continues to be driven by business, and that impacts each of our lives. So periodically, we catch up on these forces changing our city. If you took a snapshot right now, you would see that the truest era is about to begin as Winston-Salem's BB&T and Atlanta's SunTrust merge, and the combined bank, Truist, moves to Charlotte. They'll be bringing jobs along with other companies, and as they do, those companies may confront sticker shock given Charlotte's rising rents for office space. They're climbing faster here than almost anywhere else in the country. And uptown development is getting another boost, this time on the languishing north end of Tryon Street, with a new library kickstarting what leaders hope will be a revitalization of that part of town. So we're going to look at all of that and more this hour with four reporters who cover this on a daily basis. Daniel Shemtab is the growth and development reporter for the Charlotte Observer. Welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
She is here with Tony Messia, editor of the Charlotte Ledger and a weekly contributor to WFAE's Morning Edition on WFAE's Thursday morning Bizworthy sessions. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Ashley Fay is a real estate editor for the Charlotte Business Journal. Welcome back.
Hi, good morning.
And Katie Peralta is senior editor of Charlotte Agenda. Hello, how are you?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm great. How was Thanksgiving? Are we all over our tryptophan sag? We're okay? We're back? Because none of you are talking so far.
We're eating through the turkey. The turkey's all gone.
Still recovering.
But let's start with the merger of BB&T and SunTrust, because I think it goes through. They combine this Friday, December the 6th. The Federal Reserve Board and the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation gave them the okay last month. So will December the 6th be the birthday of the new bank? That's definitely to go.
That was the targeted date that they're looking at, and those usually wind up being pretty close to what they are. So yeah, it's going to be a big deal.
That involves merging banks are not just the changing signs and combining branches. It involves people and branches and electronic systems, and in this case, the movement of the two headquarters of the respective banks to Charlotte. Where does all of that stand? Where are they in the process? I mean, on Friday, will they all come together in Charlotte?
Well, it's a long process. It's going to play out over a number of months. I mean, involving, the different branches from the two banks, involving, moving a bunch of employees from Atlanta, Winston-Salem here, expanding, moving into the Hearst Tower, looking at they also have an innovation center they're looking to put, somewhere around town, tech hub kind of thing. So there are really a lot of moving pieces. It's sort of a, it's sort of a good news. It's kind of an old school Charlotte bank merger story where we sort of get to wave the flag and say this is great for Charlotte. We get another headquarters here, and then everything that comes with that.
That's where I was going next, Danielle, because we used to be, maybe we still are, the second largest banking center in the country, and we had lots of banks headquartered here. Now the Bank of America is headquartered here. That's it, isn't it? Until Friday.
Yes.
Okay, so Friday they become the second bank headquartered here, and interestingly enough, they're putting their headquarters right across the street from the Bank of America Tower. Is that deliberate? Anybody know?
I don't
I don't think so. I think honestly, when you look at it, to build a new tower in Uptown today and to find the land, it can be done. Obviously, it's being done as we're speaking, but for them to move in quickly, especially taking down a huge amount of space, and they're taking most of Hearst Tower. I think they just saw that as, okay, I can get a Tryon Street address.
Right.
We don't have to build from the ground up, and we can start moving hundreds of employees in, starting, I guess, August of this year. So
because I asked that because of the old Nations Bank First Union battle, where they were on opposite ends of Tryon Street, but they would put a branch on the opposite end, or an ATM, just
as a little reminder.
Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, the Tryon Street story is, everyone still wants to be on Tryon Street, whether you're in South End Tryon Street or Uptown Tryon Street. I think that's still important. And, with them having an option to purchase Hearst Tower probably in the first quarter, we could see Truist Tower coming. We just don't know yet. But, I think them having a Tryon Street address and being able to move in quickly and having scale quickly was important.
So how important is it for us to have these two bank headquarters? What does it do, if anything, for Charlotte? Is it bragging rights? What is it? Anything?
I think a lot of it is bragging rights, but it's also sort of this broader expansion of
banking and sort of a vote of confidence, so to speak, in Charlotte's banking scene. So, U.S. Bank just opened a first branch and is going to open, I believe, around 10 branches. Chase is opening 20. They're not headquartered here, but they kind of see this momentum. And so it opens up those opportunities.
This is a $66 billion merger. It creates a bank with, I think, around $463 billion in assets and $324 billion in deposits, and it serves 10 million customers, consumers, and businesses around the country. How many people will be moving to Charlotte from SunTrust and BB&T to run this thing?
The headquarters is supposed to house about 2,000 people, and we don't know yet the specifics on the tech hub and where that's going to be.
And BB&T and SunTrust both have a presence here, so how many of those 2,000 include those people already here? Do we know?
I believe they're in the hundreds range. Correct me if I'm wrong, but
So
I don't know. They don't usually break out a whole bunch of numbers.
So when does the migration begin for these people?
It's going to take 2 years, and actually, it's not like on Friday. If you're a BB&T customer, you're going to open up your app and it's going to say Truist. In fact, they're sort of starting with some of the states where the branches and the banks don't have a lot of overlap. Mm-hmm. So North Carolina, Virginia, and Georgia, I believe, are going to be some of the last to convert to the brand.
So they're not going to slap the Truist name up on the Hearst Tower tomorrow? They're going to
maybe
wait
in the
for
first
Maybe not
quarter.
tomorrow.
Because they're going to be in 17 states, including Arkansas, Indiana, Mississippi, New Jersey, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Georgia, North Carolina, Virginia, Florida. Is South Carolina in there too? I don't know. There are others that I didn't mention. And we're going to be last to get the branding.
I'm not sure if we'll be the absolute last, but in sort of the last phase.
So the headquarters will be in the Hearst Tower. And for people who don't know where the Hearst Tower is or what the Hearst Tower is, that's that Art Deco. It's a beautiful building. On Tryon, between Tryon and College, at Fifth Street, and I guess it used to be where the Hearst newspapers were. Are they still there? Are they gone? Does Hearst own the building?
They're moving out to the suburbs, and
Okay.
I guess a phased as well. But they signed a lease down in Torrington.
And so they're also bringing or opening a technology center here at some point, and but they have to divest themselves of about 30 branches and more than $2.4 billion in deposits. Why? Why do they have to get rid of banks?
It's an anti-competitive measure. That was sort of the agreement they came up with the Department of Justice. A lot of the concerns during the congressional hearing that they had, as well as from regulators, was, are we creating another bank that's too big to fail? Mm-hmm. And that was basically the resolution that they came to with the regulators.
How big will this bank be when you compare it to a Wells Fargo or a Bank of America or a Chase or one of the other big banks?
It's going to be the 6th largest bank by assets, so it's still not going to be anywhere near the size of Bank of America and Wells Fargo, but much more formidable than it is.
I think it's important to point out, too, if you're looking at number of employees here in Charlotte, it's going to be significantly smaller than either Bank of America or Wells Fargo.
Okay.
Bank of America's got about 15,000. Wells Fargo's got about 25,000. Truist will have 2,000. So, in terms of, who's dominating the banking scene here, it's still a lot smaller.
In an article, Danielle, that you wrote about this merger, you quote Bartlett Naylor, a financial policy advocate for a D.C.-based consumer advocacy group called Public Citizen, who says consumers will suffer a small step backwards with this merger. Why does he say that, and do other people agree with him?
Yeah, well, I think it goes back to some of the concerns brought up in the hearing, and there was also some public hearings here in Charlotte, and it's really just a concern about this too big to fail idea and basically the consolidation in the banking industry harming consumers and potentially leading to another financial crisis. Now, obviously, things have changed quite a bit since the financial crisis, and as was just pointed out, this is not anywhere near as large as Wells Fargo or Bank of America, but it is the largest bank merger since the financial crisis.
Tony Plath, who is a retired UNC Charlotte professor of finance and who used to be the go-to guy when he was working at UNC Charlotte to talk about banking trends, said that we're going to convert. Georgia and the Carolinas will convert last, in part because they are the largest, most complex, most intertwined of the two banks' territories, and because it's also where sensitivity and potential backlash toward the merger runs highest. From whom? Customers or employees? Which leads to the question, is there going to be a clash of cultures here, or is this a pretty good marriage? Or do we know?
I think that's a really great thing to unpack from the inside. I would be very curious to talk to employees. I admittedly have not because I don't cover banking, but I've heard that the cultures are extremely different.
Because the Wachovia Wells Fargo cultures, which were advertised as being the greatest thing since sliced bread, were anything but.
Right, right. And that's, I mean, internally, there's bound to be clashes, despite the fact that it might seem all, merry on the outside.
Well, BB&T was a pretty buttoned-up bank, wasn't it?
Yes.
What was SunTrust like?
SunTrust is, I've heard more like corporate. It's larger, I believe, right? Or at least by size, or by employee
BB&T was
count.
bigger, but
Is it? Okay. Well, BB&T is acquiring them, so.
I also don't cover banking.
I've heard that there's, like interesting kind of like old school, like it's very old. BB&T is very old school.
Right.
SunTrust is very like, corporate, big city, Atlanta.
So BB&T is like Wachovia was, essentially.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I was going to say also in comparing those two, one thing we'll start to see over the next several months and years is the conversion of the BB&T and SunTrust names on major landmarks such as like, SunTrust Park, I think it is in Atlanta where the Braves play, BB&T Ballpark, BB&T Field up in Winston-Salem will all turn into Truist something, Truist Field, Truist Park. Another little bragging right for Charlotte to have the name of one of Charlotte's banks on an Atlanta ball field, I think will be a nice little sticking point, a little bragging point for city boosters. But that's a major undertaking too. This is millions and millions of dollars in the making, and it'll take a really long time to unfold. Just like the Wachovia Wells Fargo thing. Remember when the tournament at Quill Hollow was Wachovia, and they transformed that to Wells Fargo. So this is not just the beginning, but this is far from over.
Okay, so we talked about this a couple of weeks ago on the news roundup. Charlotte City Council voted last month to approve rezoning along the existing Blue Line and future light rail corridors that may or may not come to exist. It was described as a major step in the city's overhaul of zoning codes. What will these changes accomplish?
Essentially, the new TOD ordinance was passed early this year, and that allows greater flexibility in design, kind of loosens the parking requirements a little bit in TOD, and I guess maybe most significantly, developers who build in TOD have to, if they want to build.
TOD is transit-oriented development.
Correct. Yes. If they want to build above a certain height, then they have to either include affordable housing, they have to meet certain sustainability requirements, or if they don't want to do any of that, they have to pay a fee in lieu, which would go into the city's housing trust fund, which is the city's primary source for funding affordable housing.
And this will apply not just to the Blue Line. It will apply to, the 4 new transit-oriented development corridors that I guess City Council has identified. Where are they?
So there's actually 4 zoning, categories, if you will, ranging from most intense to least intense. So when you look ahead, obviously that would be the east-west line, the silver line, which is being discussed. There's been some discussion about whether or not the streetcar could apply for TOD. There are a few developers that have a rezoning petition out for TOD in Plaza Midwood, which we know is going to have the streetcar extension at some point. But there's still some debate about where exactly TOD will go, but it's generally going to be within a half a mile of a transit corridor.
And this was unanimously approved by City Council. How much of the thrust of this is really designed to impact the availability of affordable housing? Is that the whole reason that they did this, or is it?
I would say a large part of it. That was a common theme because as we look at the Blue Line, there's just not a dearth. There's a dearth of affordable housing.
Will this new zoning actually result in more affordable housing being built, or are we just taking a stab in the dark? I have 20 seconds.
I think it depends on whether or not developers are going to actually include the affordable housing or pay the fee. Because if they're going to pay the fee, then that's probably not going to get built on the
Oh, so they
line.
have an out.
They pay a fee,
yes,
which
the fee
could then
lieu.
go towards affordable housing elsewhere.
Okay, well, there's more to talk about that when we come back. It's Charlotte Talks on WFAE. Support for Charlotte Talks comes from WFAE members and MindPath Care Centers, offering general outpatient psychiatric and psychotherapy mind care for people of all ages, designed to help individuals deal with challenges that impact their well-being. Information and appointments at mindpathcare.com. And the Whitewater Center, providing year-round opportunities and access to the active outdoor lifestyle, now including ice skating and lights. More at usnwc.org. Well, at one time, Charlotte's public schools were the poster child for successful racial integration. Today, though, CMS is nearly as segregated as it was before the Supreme Court's 1954 Brown versus Board of Education decision. As racism increasingly rears its ugly head around the country, we meet four educators tackling racism head on, and they will share some of their ideas on how we can solve this tomorrow on this program at 9.
A lot of great bands get their start in a garage. Very few start at the White House. August Green blends jazz and hip-hop. It's a collaboration from the rap star Common, jazz pianist Robert Glasper, and drummer Kareem Riggins. Their first song won an Emmy. August Green, next time on 1A.
That conversation coming up in the second hour of 1A at 11 on 90.7 WFAE, Charlotte's NPR news source.
It's Charlotte Talks on listener-funded 90.7 WFAE and 90.3 WFHE. I'm Mike Collins. It's our periodically business roundtable. Let's just call it that. With Tony Messia, who's the editor of the Charlotte Ledger, and who is with our morning edition crew on Thursday mornings for the Bizworthy segment. Katie Peralta is here she's the senior editor of Charlotte Agenda. Ashley Fay is real estate editor for the Charlotte Business Journal, and Daniel Shemtab is the economic growth and development reporter for the Charlotte Observer. And you brought up the word fee, Danielle, just before the break. So let's explore that a little bit. The whole idea for this transit rezoning in these rail corridors was to encourage more affordable housing in the very areas that people might live if they needed to use transit because they can't afford a car or an Uber or something like that. And so you can get a greater height on your building if you include affordable housing in that building. Or, you just said, you could pay a fee. Now, why would they even put the back door in? If they really want to encourage affordable housing, why would City Council make that an option?
Well, I think it is worth noting that all of this has a backdrop of Charlotte does not have the ability. Well, it's a little bit murky, but generally they believe that they do not have the ability to mandate affordable housing in development, which is something that many other cities across the country do.
But if we say, this ordinance, as I understand it, says you can only build so high, but if you include affordable housing, we'll let you go up a couple more stories. Why isn't that acceptable? They don't know that that's acceptable, or there's some fuzziness there?
I think it's also supposed to, consider commercial development. So an office developer who's building, a 23-story tower in South End will not include affordable housing just because that's not what they do. That's not what they're building. But if they're in this new TOD district and they want to go above, what the minimum is, then City Council will say, or the city will say, you don't build affordable housing, but you need to pay this fee instead, and we'll take that money and build affordable housing elsewhere.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and it's not just all about affordable housing. I mean, one of the big ideas here is they want to encourage density along these light rail lines, which is appropriate for the way a city grows. And that, remember, light rail works best, transit works best if you have high density, people able to use it. So,
But hasn't that proven to be what happened in South End with the light rail? Isn't that what's going to happen all the way up and down that thing without any?
Undoubtedly, you're seeing that. All up and down. You're seeing. A lot of people disagree. Okay, well, is light rail, is it working as a mode of transportation? I think results on that are maybe mixed, but as a development tool, I think everybody has buy-in that this is something that is really, really spurs development, which is why you see a lot of parts of town really want it.
And this does have buy-in because, Ashley, these new zoning rules, I think you reported, have 90% of the owners along that, at least the blue line, they approve of it. At the zoning meeting, however, Mayor Lyles read a letter on behalf of Larkin Eggleston, another councilman who was absent, in which he expressed concern about how historic neighborhoods like Dilworth and Wilmore, which border transit districts, might be impacted. Was that addressed?
Yeah, so at the public hearing, which was a couple months ago now, some people from Dilworth did come up and say, listen, we're supportive of the density, we're supportive of it, but we just don't want, a large tower looming over Dilworth because, we have historic covenants in place. We've spent a long time trying to preserve this neighborhood. So, they did say at the meeting that historic district and the rules that kind of govern Dilworth from a historic perspective, would supersede TOD rules. So, for instance, like if you say, okay, well, I want to build this massive tower and I'll just pay, the fee and whatever, you can't necessarily do that if you're in a historic neighborhood because that commission has to review it.
But on South Boulevard, you are right across the street in some areas of South Boulevard from Dilworth, and they're putting these big 23-story towers up, so you're directly across the street. What difference does it make?
I think it depends on what side of South Boulevard you're on. If you're on the side that's closer to Dilworth, you're seeing a slightly lower TOD zoning.
You're still across the street.
Right, you're still across the street, and unfortunately, that maybe for the neighborhood, that's kind of just the way it goes. But the city did come back and say, okay, we'll downgrade this density that's immediately adjacent to Dilworth, so that we're not going to have TODUC, which is the kind of the sky's the limit as far as what you can do there, right next to a historic neighborhood.
Okay. So one of the neighborhoods affected by transit, of course, is NODA. And Danielle, you reported recently on a fast-changing stretch of North Brevard. This has been an industrial site heretofore. How is it changing, and are the changes welcome?
So this particular site is pretty small. It's about 6,000 square feet that a architecture firm is moving into, and then another 5,000 square feet they're still leasing. But I think one of the reasons that I wanted to write about this is because this stretch has just been changing so fast. You have Optimist Hall that just opened. I believe it's probably a mile or so from there. And then there's also another mill that the same developer is rehabbing right next door to this site, sort of a Brevard and 25th Street area. And you've got hundreds of apartments coming. So really a lot of change. In terms of development, I mean, I think there is definitely, this is really close to a lot of the areas that are already seeing big increases in property values, a lot of concerns about gentrification in some of the established neighborhoods like Optimist Park.
Is it too late to stop it? I mean, NODA, when it first became a word that people spoke, it was kind of a funky, artsy, groovy. That dates me. Kind of a place, and gradually it has become something other than that. It's become kind of a bedroom community of Charlotte with nice apartments, brand new stuff going up around the light rail line, which has taken away all of the patina that used to be there. Is that going to continue? Is it over? Is the funkiness of NODA done?
Well, I think, I mean, you have the main stretch still, that main block, and those still have some of the historic buildings. But yes, I mean, certainly, I think it's inevitable that as it becomes more popular, then it's expanding. I mean, a lot of these areas, in fact, will market themselves as an extension of NODA, even though, it's actually probably a mile and a half or so away.
I think just again, back to transit, it can't be overstated how much of an impact that has. And the land values now in NODA are just markedly higher than they were. So, for any group to come in and to do something, new or interesting, they're going to have to bring in sort of a credit-worthy tenant. I mean, we're seeing national co-working coming in with Industrious. You've got Jenny's Ice Cream now. So you've got these kinds of tenants that are, kind of bigger national groups that can afford to pay the rents that NODA is now commanding.
Is Jenny's Ice Cream a thing?
Apparently it is. There's like 3 or 4 in Charlotte now, I believe.
Yeah, I know.
So
There's one in South End, I know.
Yeah.
Charlotte's been looking at its bus system now for years and trying to make it more, I guess, user-friendly, and to make it something that people will want to ride because it will take them to places they want to go when they want to go without having to wait too long to go. And we've gone from individual routes to this wheel and spoke thing that takes everybody downtown to transfer, and now we're going back to individual, more straight-line routes. Katie, this has become more than just a transit challenge, it seems to me. City leaders now see this as a way to address upward mobility. Talk about that.
So I think I wrote that talks about upward mobility seem to center squarely on affordable housing. Of course, that's a huge issue. The city has devoted millions of dollars to this issue. And then when we're talking about transit, we kind of tend to focus on light rail. But at the intersection of those two things is improving the bus system, which is, used by more people in Charlotte. There are like 1.2 or something like that million people who use the bus system versus 800 something thousand that use the light rail.
But the bus system goes everywhere. The light rail only goes two places.
Correct.
North and south.
Right. And, many people would use the light rail if they had access to it, but it's just too far away from where they live.
Right.
So city leaders see this as a way to, and first of all, backing up a little bit, in areas that are more widely used by the buses, oftentimes they don't have as many job options. So folks need to travel into the city center. They need to travel to South Park. Some of the biggest hospitality hubs in the city are more affluent ones. Ballantyne, South Park, University City is becoming more of one, Dilworth, South End. And a lot of people can't afford to live there, so they need to get there somehow. Parking is ridiculously expensive. Owning a car is not cheap either. So the bus system is one way to do it. And for years, we've had this hub and spoke system, which basically means that everything connects in one hub, Uptown, the transit center. And so last year, Katz decided to do away with that, although it's still very much in place. They have started redesigning routes. There are many routes that have changed already, but it's not completely a grid system yet.
You report this is a quiet focus of Mayor Lyle's second term, and it comes at a time of declining ridership on the bus system. Do they know why ridership has been declining?
It's a number of reasons. First of all, while the bus system has seen its ridership decline, the light rail has seen its ridership increase. So they think that some of those people are moving to the light rail instead. The other thing is if people do own cars, gas is much cheaper now than it was, last year. Let's see, I think remote work was another one that Tony has, of course, written about before. People are getting to work at home or within, walking distance to their home and maybe not requiring public transit.
Right.
So it's a number of factors.
But the people who work at home, are they people who ride the bus, or are they higher-level employees who would be able to afford a car if they had to go to work every day? It seems to me that people in lower economic positions are people that can't work at home. They have to be in the building.
That's a great point. I'm just basing this off an analysis that I looked at.
One of the problems is the average wait time. One of you rode the bus. Was it you, Katie?
Mm-hmm.
All right. The average wait time, I'm told, between buses on the same route in non-rush hour is about 45 minutes. So if you miss the bus, which I've done many times going to school, you miss the bus. The next bus is 45 minutes later. And CAT CEO John Lewis says buses have to mirror the reliability and frequency of the Blue Line. Can that be accomplished? What will it take? And why hasn't it been done?
It seems like an easy question, doesn't it? It's a lot of things that need to be done. They need more buses. They need more people to man those buses, drivers. They need more mechanics. And they need to look at things like routes, of course, and what makes sense during rush hour. They're also looking at bus dedicated lanes. They'll start that in Uptown.
Oh, God,
soon.
please, let's talk about that. We have dedicated bus lanes on Independence. I'm the old curmudgeon here. So we have these dedicated bus lanes on Independence, which are the only ones that I know about. Are they the only ones that exist right now?
I didn't even know that there were any on Independence. Seriously.
Aren't they closed now? I'm not totally sure that they're still open.
Well, I don't know. They were open.
Maybe,
They were
I
closed.
think-
They were open. They were closed.
I went on them by accident once, but
I feel like maybe during construction, I feel like maybe they've closed.
yeah, I think they're now
since.
closed. But you're
Okay.
right; they were there for a long time.
And they were originally conceived to be high-density commuter lanes or something like the toll lanes on 77 are now. So where are these other dedicated bus lanes that they're thinking of putting? Oh, God, here we go.
Well, TBD. So they're going to start with one kind of like pilot, which will be, I believe, on 4th Street in Uptown between McDowell and the Transit Center. And that's like a very small stretch. But then they'll look at sort of other corridors that are high traffic throughout this city. I think Central Avenue is one of them. Ones that are not accessible.
Here's what I
by light
have.
rail.
Central Avenue, Providence Road, Southwest, and Wilkinson Boulevard.
Yes.
One very simple question. How?
That's the question of the hour.
Because South Boulevard is 2 lanes in each direction. Providence Road is a nightmare morning and night. It's 2 lanes in each direction.
And these are,
If you take one of those lanes away and make it a bus lane,
so these are just the ideas that they are thinking of right now. They have not put any plan into place to execute on. And I think that, generally speaking, the idea that transit officials might say, behind closed doors is if you make driving a nightmare enough, maybe more people will start using public transit. I've gotten to that point where I'm just like, I could walk, 3 blocks to the light rail. Might that be easier at this
here's
point?
an idea. Let's make every road in town, give it a dedicated bus lane and a dedicated bike lane. That'll solve the problem with cars.
And the ones that they're not doing that to, Mike, they're going to make into toll lanes, which going all up and down 77 and out Independence. So
What an idea.
This is a confluence of all the Mike Collins complaints, all in one big segment here.
So we're talking with John Lewis, who's the CEO of CATS. Next Thursday, this will all come up again. South Park started life as a mall. That was all it was. And it wasn't even the premier mall. The Eastland Mall was the premier. Now South Park is a whole other town unto itself. And more changes are coming, we are told, Tony. We've talked about one of these changes in the past. I think it was about a year or so ago. We talked about this thing called the Loop, a pedestrian path which goes around the South Park area for 3 miles in a circle. Where does that stand at the moment? Is it open? Is it running? Are people using it?
It's not open yet. It's going to be built piecemeal around there. This is all part of a lot of changes that are going on around South Park, because you see a lot of developments. You see that Apex South Park. They're making good progress on that, where the old the ski slope church, Sharon United Methodist Church used to be. So you got apartment complexes going up. You've got the Colony Apartments about to be knocked down, and mixed-use development going in there. So the Loop is going to be built piecemeal, part by the city, part by developers as they develop the properties. It's going to be a little while, but it's going to be kind of neat. I think it's going to be kind of like the Greenway is. If you look at the renderings always make it look really nice.
Who's paying for this?
Well, it's a mix between the developers and the city, that they try, when they approve these plans, they try and get the developers to make some of these improvements. That'll take some of it, but the city's going to do some of it.
And when will it be open?
Well, I think it's going to be a number of years. Like I say, it's going to be done in stages.
Do they see this as a recreational project, or is this a transportation project, giving people an alternative to getting in their cars to go anywhere, which is almost impossible in South Park?
Yeah, I think it's sort of all of the above. It's sort of a community building, sort of get out, walk the dog, walk to work. It's sort of all of the above, in which they really want to encourage a lot of this.
And of course, South Park has become, as other areas of town have become, a mecca for apartment development. How many projects are underway right now?
Apartments.
Several. I mean, you have the one that development, the Hazel South Park on Barclay Downs, kind of behind the Dean and DeLuca and Dick's Sporting Goods over there. That looks to be just about done. You have the Apex development. You got several hundred more going in there. You have the Colony development. You're talking about 300,
they're about to
350.
start taking down the Colony Apartments.
Yeah, I mean, those have been there since the 70s. They've
Yeah.
been there for a long time, and they look like they were built in the 70s. And so it's about a pretty big site, about 27 acres.
So more apartments going up in the place of them? And-
More apartments, a Publix, a fitness center, maybe another movie theater. So if you like the traffic now, you're going to
maybe a
love it.
hotel at some point.
That's exactly what I was thinking. But there's also an AC by Marriott, Hotel by Marriott going up on Roxborough Road. Isn't there already a Marriott right there?
There, it is right behind the other Marriott. But yeah, it's right next to specialty shops. That's just about done. I was just there the other day. It looks pretty nice. Rooftop bar, really nice stonework on the outside. They're trying to make it sort of a destination.
I just want to go back a couple of years of research here, because I remember us saying something, we don't want to be another Atlanta.
Right.
I remember somebody saying that. I'll find it a little bit
Well,
later.
the thinking is, Mike, either you evolve or you die. And so that's, you have to, if you just sort of leave things the way they are, then people migrate to other hot parts of town like South End. And if you're South Park, or if you're Ballantyne, you want to kind of keep up with the Joneses.
Okay, more to talk about with the things changing around Charlotte in our business roundup when we come back from this break at Charlotte Talks on WFAE. Support for Charlotte Talks comes from WFAE members and Levine Cancer Institute, part of Atrium Health, dedicated to bringing care and treatments to the Carolinas, offering access to current clinical trials and 200 cancer doctors at more than 25 locations. Atrium Health, And NC Quick Pass, offering drivers who get stuck in traffic tips about how to avoid the slowdown. Details about avoiding the slowdown at ncquickpass.com. The UK is a week and a half away from a snap election that will decide Prime Minister Boris Johnson's fate. It's taking place against the backdrop of Brexit, which is also the reason why the election was called in the first place. There's also a lot at stake for Ireland. 1A has the view from Ireland with columnist Fintan O'Toole coming up in 20 minutes at 10 o'clock right here on WFAE. And we will continue our business roundup in just 30 seconds.
I'm Tanya Mosley from NPR's Here and Now. When NPR was founded, we had ambitious goals for public radio to bring quality journalism to everyone, period. No strings attached. Decades later, we're keeping that promise, and that means we rely on you. Everyone can listen to this station, and when you support it this Giving Tuesday, you help keep our promise. Here's how to keep public radio for the public.
Support the charities you love this Giving Tuesday. Give to WFAE at WFAE.org.
It's Charlotte Talks on WFAE and WFHE. I'm Mike Collins. Tony Messia is here from the Charlotte Ledger. Ashley Fay from the Charlotte Business Journal. Katie Peralta from the Charlotte Agenda. Daniel Shemtop from the Charlotte Observer. And it's our business roundup. Back to Dilworth we go for a brief amount of time. Atrium's expansion plans we talked about before. They have some people nervous because there's a lot of... We don't really know what's going on here. I know that they bought the Keyman building on East Boulevard. That's going away. There's some question about whether or not that would include where the Starbucks is, and God knows people have to have their Starbucks. And then there's that development in the very next block as you head from Scott Avenue toward Kenilworth Avenue, where all the complexion of the retail is about to change. So let's clear all this up, because we talked about this the last time you guys were here, but some of the things were murky. Do we know what's going on there, when it will start, and what it will be?
For the Keyman building?
Keyman and the Starbucks, et cetera.
So, well, the developers haven't said much, but there is a permit out that says they're going to build an office and potentially medical office building on sort of the site, I believe, of all three of the buildings.
And
It
it's
would
not,
require demolition of the Starbucks among the other ones.
Okay.
Right.
but that's not Atrium. That's Summit Health Group, or Health, sorry about that. Summit Healthcare Group in Winston-Salem.
Soon to be owned by Atrium?
That's a good question.
Well,
isn't
they
it?
do a lot of medical office development. Actually, that's pretty much exclusively what they do, if I'm
Yeah.
not wrong.
So this starts when? Do we know?
Well, it hasn't been announced. It's really all we have is the permit, and they're not really
If the
saying a
permits
lot.
are out, though, I would expect at least demolition to be somewhat soon. As far as when we'll get some clarity on what exactly they're doing.
So we see all these buildings going up. This new building we just talked about on East Boulevard, that will happen sometime in the near future, and we see all these 23-story office buildings scheduled to go up in South End and other places around town. We have construction cranes everywhere, which means there's more office space being created, and yet rents on current office space continue to rise. They're up 7.5% over last year. Why? Usually, if there's more supply, there's less demand and lower prices.
Well, there's a lot of reasons for it, but actually the pace and rate of construction is a big reason for it, because costs for labor, costs for materials, it's all a lot more money because there's so much going on. So there's less people out there, so it's more competitive to get, a contractor or engineers or what have you. So the cost of construction is just markedly higher than it has been, maybe going back 5 to 7 years. But then demand is also really high. And, we have these buildings going up, they're significantly pre-leased. The cost of construction, investor activity they're coming in and buying old office buildings and, putting $10 million in it and then raising rents. So it's both existing product and new construction space that's seeing the increases in rents.
And you say that some of this is tied to the effort on the part of some businesses to attract top talent. What is top talent got to do with rental prices?
Millennials, essentially. They're more willing to, go to a center city or a South End to sort of be in that quote unquote cool environment. Companies are saying, okay, well, I know it's going to cost me a little bit more, but, maybe I'll go take less square footage, but be in a higher price submarket.
So you're reporting that rents are up 36% in 5 years. Uptown rents rose 41% in that same time, and we are one of the top performing office markets in the country. Why aren't these high prices changing that equation, making it the reverse?
It's a relative question. If you look at other markets, they're still more expensive than we are. And, you look at the types of companies that are coming here and taking down big floor plates. They're used to paying a lot more in New York and San Francisco and other markets. So even though, Charlotte is going through this really rapid increase in office rates, it's still comparatively cheaper. Where you're seeing the push come to shove, though, is smaller groups or mid-sized groups that have been in Charlotte forever, and they're saying, wow, this is a 30% increase from the last time I had my lease. What am I going to do? Am I going to stay here, pay more in rent? Am I going to relocate my business? So I think that's where you're seeing most of the heartburn is some of these smaller
I was talking
groups.
to a guy who has a karate studio, or had a karate studio in South End, where his rent, he had 8,000 square feet. He was paying $5,000 a month. His rent came up for renewal, and the landlord said, instead of $5,000, we'd like to up it to $16,000 a month. So this is, that just shows you.
Is he moving?
He moved, yes. He moved out to, yeah. And so, to Ashley's point, I mean, it's, the banks, the Truists, the Honeywells, the Bank of Americas, they can absorb these costs, but it's these smaller guys that are kind of feeling the
So
pinch.
is this universal across the city, or are these really happening in pockets?
I mean, you're seeing rental rate increases everywhere, even in discount submarkets like Airport or University. But the most prolific change has been in Uptown, has been in South End, Midtown.
How unsustainable is this? Can this go on?
It's not sustainable long term. Eventually, we will see a moderation in rental rate rental rate increases because it just cannot keep up. There's going to be a point where people will say that's just too much. A developer saying I can't get those rents, or a tenant's going to say I can't pay those rents. I think it will be a slow moderation because Charlotte's still growing. There's still demand, but it will have to moderate.
I don't know how many of you were downtown on Thanksgiving night, but the towers were decked out in Thanksgiving colors of orange and gold and red, and they were bookmarked by the old office of a Bank of America tower on Trade and Tryon, and the new Bank of America tower down where the Observer used to be. And that new building, that new Bank of America tower, is not owned by the Bank of America, and in fact was just sold for a record price. By whom, to whom, and why did it fetch such a high dollar amount?
Well, so it was a joint venture between Lincoln Harris, the developer, and Goldman Sachs, who's their partner on the Legacy Union project. It sold for a little bit more than $440 million, which is a record on total sales price for single office transaction in the state. But that will soon be eclipsed, we guess, with Truist acquiring Hearst Tower. But I mean, it drew international interest. I mean, there were Asian investors looking at it. There were people from all over the world that were interested in buying it. And I think it's just because of all the things we've talked about. Charlotte, there's a lot going on. There's a lot of interest. Investors want to be here, and they're willing to pay top dollar prices we haven't seen here because of all the things, population growth, job growth, all those things that we've talked about.
Record sale price have implications for other buildings? Or like, for instance, the new Truist Bank intends to buy the Hearst Tower. Will this impact the price of the Hearst Tower?
So Cousins, who owns Hearst Tower now, said earlier this year that they would buy it for about $455.5 million, which is more than the Legacy Union building. So I mean, it would set a new watermark in that respect. But I think if you just look at the comps and you look at the things going on, yes, this is sort of the new normal, at least for the current growth period. And when other buildings get listed, that will certainly get factored in. But these are new construction, or at least the Bank of America building is, and that makes a big difference.
So there have been rumblings about this for a long time, and last week it finally was unveiled. The downtown library, or the uptown library, is going to be an anchor for the redevelopment of the North Tryon corridor. They unveiled plans for the new library late last month, and now they're embarking on a $70 million capital campaign to help pay for it. Why the need for a new library?
The current building is from 1956, and
Which actually surprised me, because I remember them building at least the facade of the current one not 20 minutes ago.
So the bones of it are from 1956, and they doubled the size of it in 1989, which is probably what you're referring to.
Yeah.
And at the time, there was a significant need for more space because the city was and is growing, but people were spending a lot of time in the library. They had a growing collection. And now that building just feels out of date. And they also wanted this, this plan has been in the works for years.
Yeah.
They have been wanting to kind of tie it to other development of North Tryon.
Yeah, this was, as I understand it, this was originally, maybe it hasn't changed. Maybe they're still doing this. And I'd like to hear from you. This was originally envisioned to be an Imaginon for adults, and they were going to tie it in to what is now Spirit Square by taking down most of Spirit Square except for the McGlowan Theater, which is an historic landmark, building a new building in its place, tying it into the library, and making this like an entertainment, because it's right next door to the Carolina Theater, too, to make this like an entertainment complex, including possibly even a symphony hall. Where is all of that? Did that just evaporate?
I think that you're referring to the plans that they had talked about in 2012 or 13 or something, when there was the library committee that came in and started offering new plans to re-examine what the game plan should be essentially for when this thing did take place. And they did recommend doing something smaller in scale, but one that's state of the art, one that's, go ahead.
This is all part of the North Tryon Vision Plan. It's sort of the area, and I think it's about like 50 square blocks. It's pretty large, and it's seen as the largest remaining development opportunity for the city. So the library was a really critical piece to that plan. But the Carolina Theater is also part of it, so there are other aspects that they're still rolling out.
The library is part of the 7th and Tryon plan specifically, which is supposed to be a 2-block redevelopment, including Spirit Square. In that plan, they called for affordable housing, office space, a hotel. They wanted to convert the Hall House into a boutique hotel, and that's currently owned by the Charlotte Housing Authority.
And the Hall House is between
7th and 8th?
7th and 8th on Tryon.
Right, exactly. So what remains unclear right now, at least from what I've kind of noticed, is who's going to redevelop that. The city put out or the county put out a request for qualifications maybe 2 years ago now. They had a short list of developers released last May, but no master redevelopment agreement has been executed since that point.
So when does construction on the library, when is that scheduled to start?
I believe in 21.
Okay. And that will anchor whatever's to come as we head
That's
north.
correct. It's seen as the sort of the first domino to fall.
So this would be like between 2020 and 2030, this is all going to take place.
I guess so, yeah. At different parts of the North Tryon plan will probably come up.
Okay, so the Panthers, several related. I'm going to run through these quickly because we already know that nothing's happening yet, but it's likely to happen by the end of the month. The Major League Soccer folks are supposed to decide by the end of the month where the 30th expansion city is, and this is our team to lose. Is that right?
That's certainly what it looks like by all outward appearances.
So what has to happen between now and the end of the month for Charlotte to snag this team?
Well, I think the
For
first
David
step.
Tepper to snag this.
First step. I think Tepper, has put forth this, proposal. The city has put forth this proposal to Major League Soccer, and Major League Soccer, I think, first has to say we want you, and then also you have the city council that needs to go ahead and say, from what it sounds like, approve some money to actually, build the offices and the training facility, which has been reported to be at East
if we
Mall.
get this team, whether or not the city council or the county commission kicks in money, will this hurry up the inevitable, which is the request for a new stadium?
It'll certainly bring that conversation to the forefront because the MLS has said that one big sticking point for Charlotte is the fact that we have one of the oldest NFL stadiums in the country. And that is something that needs to be addressed. It's like, of course, anyone who lives here is like, we just finished up renovations, $80 million worth of renovations on that stadium, but it's still
Or will
old.
be requested if soccer comes to be, because they have to change where the cameras go for soccer, because the TV cameras need to be in a different position than they are for the NFL. And that's just some of the changes. Now, David Tepper has already identified what he thinks is a good site for a new stadium, which is where Charlotte Pipe and Foundry has been since, I believe, the beginning of the 20th century. And they have said that they've been kind of thinking about moving. What have they said since David Tepper has said that'd be a good place to put the stadium?
They've said, well, we're in conversations with them very informally. They have purchased a piece of land out in Stanley County, I think it was a few years ago, that would accommodate a facility of their size. But the time it would take to leave their current plant, build a new one, I mean, this is years in the making.
So this would give the team a chance to think about how they're going to handle the PSL owners, right?
And that's something that David Tepper acknowledges. These PSL owners built the stadium that stands uptown. They have a vested interest in what happens to it, but their money is tied to that stadium.
Right.
They're not guaranteed anything with a new stadium.
They'd probably like to also do it during a year when they have a chance of making the playoffs and there's a lot of fan excitement, but it doesn't happen when you lose to the Redskins at home.
Yeah. Okay, so the pedestrian bridge over I-277 was announced. It's part of the rail trail. It's one step closer to becoming a reality because just prior to Thanksgiving, a commemorative marker was laid to signify the start of the bridge at the Blue Line Stonewall station. Is this a go? Is this definite it's going to happen?
Yeah, it seems like.
Now, this bridge
Fully
design,
funded, I believe.
when does it begin, the construction? Late 2021, something like that? Why can't they start it now?
They're still doing some things with the design. I know they're not even fully formed on yet.
Well,
They're-
the design is like this big swooping
Right.
metal stuff going over that just seems to be completely decorative and expensive.
Right.
Why?
I don't know, something
Maybe it's their
iconic for
artwork,
Charlotte?
you know.
I'm not quite sure.
They called it they called it a visual landmark for the city.
And Councilmember Larkin Eggleston says he envisions various benches and resting areas along the bridge. Again, why? Is this going to be like the High Line in New York? Is that what
about
this
to
is
make
going
It
to
might be the thought process, honestly. I mean, even the planning director has said, we'd like to make this a place where people can, kind of hang out and program it and all this other stuff. Not clear yet on how that would look, but they've got a budget to work within, and I'm sure they'll try to make the most
So
of it.
we talked last time you guys were here very quickly, and we're going to talk very quickly about it again today, and that is the Central Park of Charlotte, which is the rail yard over there to the, I guess, north of the city, which is owned by Norfolk Southern, which has historically not been very friendly in dealing with municipalities. And they would have to turn over and move all those rail lines to allow for this Central Park. Has progress been made since the last time we talked about that?
I think that currently the group behind this proposal is working to garner public support, and they are making connections with neighborhood leaders such as NODA, Optimist Park, Villa Heights that kind of surround that area in order to get buy-in. And then the plan would be to begin talks in earnest with Norfolk Southern as well as elected officials. But from what I can tell, elected officials, I haven't met any who are against this. I mean, I had Julie Eisalt reaching out to me. I had the planning director, Taiwo Wilbo, reaching out to me, and it's just seems to have, universal support. But except for Norfolk Southern, and that's the big
So
but.
this would be a quarter the size of Central Park, but twice the size of Freedom Park, and we'll keep our eye on it for the future because we're out of time. Tony Messia, Katie Peralta, Ashley Fay, and Danielle Shemtab. Thank you all for the hour.